Today we are going to see test inside containers, Dockerize Appium test, and this about me. Myself, Srinivasan Sekar. I work as a senior consultant for ThoughtWorks, Appium member and maintainer of Appium's Java client, Docker Appium, and Selenium contributor as well. So, what do you expect from this talk? No expectations? That saved me. Are any expectations?
Fulfillment of the subject that you were talking about.
Sorry?
Fulfillment of the subject that you were speaking
Okay.
about.
Okay. At least I have certain questions. Yep, please.
I think running tests on mobile is a challenge.
Okay.
Looking to see some better options to
Mm-hmm.
so you can put it in a container without knowing
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yep. At least I have certain questions from the talk titled Test Inside Containers. What is container? Dockerize Appium test. What's Docker? Okay. Let's see. What is Docker? What is container? Then, what's Appium? Why we need to Dockerize Appium? Yep. We'll see the agenda. Let's see what is Docker. Then, how is it? Is it a VM? How many of you have worked on virtual machines here? Yeah, have a good amount of hands. Yep. How about Dockers? How many of you have worked on Dockers? Cool. How many of you have worked on Appium? Yeah. Then what's Appium in a high level? And is Appium installation a pain? How many of you have faced issues while installing Appium? It can be anything. iOS, Android, it's just an Appium server. How many of you have faced issues while installing Appium server? Okay. And why do we need to Dockerize Appium tests? And if I Dockerize for Android, how about iOS? And a real demo. Okay, let's see what is virtual machine, what is Docker, and how is it going to be different from a virtual machine? Any idea what is virtual machine? Can someone tell me what is a virtual machine? Many have raised your hands. Day in, day out, we work on virtual machine.
OS without hardware?
Please come again.
OS without hardware.
Yep, okay. Anything else? Okay, what is Docker? Many of us have raised our hand. Yeah. Sorry?
It's a container manager.
Container manager. Okay. What is container? Okay, it's fine. Sorry? Application virtualization. Mm-hmm. Might be. Sorry? Okay, environment. Mini environment. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to the difference between virtual machine and Docker. VM is a hardware virtualization wherein we have a very good amount of, we have a pretty good hardware installed, and then on top of it we put our, we virtualize the hardware with whatever OS that we like. So it is typically a hypervisor that spins up guest OS and it differs certain applications. So one application may run on one OS and another application may run on different OS on top of an host operating system with the help of hypervisor. So, okay, what is Docker then? So we don't have an hypervisor there. It's so lightweight. It shares the same kernel. So applications, there might be different applications running inside shares the same kernel, which has a process space, memory space. Since it uses same kernel and it doesn't have an hypervisor, it is so lightweight. And as he said, it's container. Sorry, please come again. What did you say? Sorry? Container manager. Yep. We can spin up as many Docker containers in seconds. Like there are videos which I have seen, like spinning up 3,000 to 4,000 containers in seconds and managing those containers. To spin up a virtual machine, how much time does it take for you guys? Just to start a virtual machine. One virtual machine. Depends on the OS. Okay, let's take a pretty good OS, whichever you like. 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, just to spin up one virtual machine. Yeah. So that's how it differs from Docker. So Docker is a technology. It's an open source platform wherein you containerize whatever which is dependent for your application. For example, we run on a we need an web application, or we work on a web application. Dependencies of a web application. It depends on the database. It depends on the IAS. So there are so many dependencies. For example, developer needs Node.js 7. Can be any dependencies. So all the dependencies of a web application, not necessarily a web application, all the dependencies of an application are kept inside a container or containerized. Only the dependencies, libraries, environment variables that are required to power up your application are only kept, whereas in virtual machine, it comes up with all the OS, it comes up with all the other dependencies. Like if you turn on a Windows virtual machine, it comes up with calculator. What is my web application going to do with calculator? What we are going to do with calculator? Not required. Yep. So that's how it is different. Yep. So open platform for developing, shipping, and running application. So we don't need to maintain or put someone to maintain infrastructure so that your developer application is completely tied up with your application, with your infrastructure, so that we maintain the container as like how we maintain our application. So for example, tomorrow I may come up with an application that needs Java 8, and my colleague might need to test that application, and he wrote the code in Java 7 to test that application. Sorry. Yeah. So a developer needs Java 8 to power his web application. A tester needs Java 7. He writes his code. He is familiar in Java 7. He writes his code on Java 7. So you can have two containers, one with Java 8 where developer works, and another one with Java 7 where tester works. So dependencies are completely packaged inside. So you don't need to put extra effort to manage your infrastructure. It's like how we manage your application. Yeah, it's for shipping, testing, deploying code quickly. You can reduce the delay. Yep, time to market is the benefit. For example, for a 4-member team, someone is joining newly as a developer. Just to set up his box, DevBox, developer box, at least he need half a day. If you're setting up a new virtual machine, you need to download all its dependencies. At least if he is very good in managing issues, resolving it, at least he needs half a day. Or just copy pasting the VM from one machine to another machine. Again, it depends on how speed you can copy and paste it. So those are all the difficulties. And if you containerize it, as I said, you can spin up a container in just seconds. It's just a matter of seconds. He's onboarded to your team. And straight away you can start his coding. Yep. This is how Docker architecture, Docker works. It's a client-server architecture. Server exposes certain REST APIs where clients are commands, clients are CLI commands, as like how we have our Git commands, Git pull, push, same way. We have a Docker commands that interacts with the Docker daemon, which is a Docker server, through a REST API, which Docker exposes. And the instructions that a container, whether it needs to have Ubuntu or any flavors of Linux, or what all dependencies that requires, all these instructions are noted in a file called Docker file, which I will show it later. So Docker file, which I will show it later, and then when you build it, it builds in, it passes through all the commands through the REST API and creates an image called Docker image, which can be saved in a registry, as like how we have a GitHub, we have a Docker app to save our Docker images. With the help of single Docker image, we can spin up many containers, as you can see over there. So only one image, just spin up thousands of containers, depends on your hardware. So typically, a Docker CI/CD workflow will look like this. It has a GitHub version control. Whenever developer pushes a code, any source code repositories will compile an image, build an image, and save it in a Docker app or any Docker registries that we use. And then tester can pull that image, spin up the container, and your application is up for him to test. And he can spin up the container for his testing, and a container can talk to test container can talk to a container which developer has. Just testing over containers now. And when everything is green, it can be deployed to whichever environment that we need. So a workflow will look like this. A build will be triggered whenever a developer commits the code. A Docker local file with the commit hash is getting generated, and then QA or tester can spin up his container, which has the test code, and that runs against the container that has a web application or application that is running and active. And if everything is perfect, it can be released to a Docker registry, or else, we can play around. We can notify the failure back to the developer. This is the failure. So, how many of you work on mobile application testing here? That's cool. What are all the challenges that you face when you want to test your mobile application?
Network, different devices.
Okay, a lot of devices to be managed, to be tested. Your application should work in almost all the devices that application support.
Network problem.
Okay, I can take it as an infrastructure. Yeah. Anything else? Any other challenges? Sorry? Yep. Okay. Another one is OS, iOS 10.2. Yeah.
Building takes a lot of time. You need the native.
Building a Docker image.
Yeah, building the image for native applications. Building the app for native applications takes a lot of time. Like for iOS, you need Xcode for you to do it.
Yep. Okay. So application dependencies. Yep. How many of you write automation code for your mobile apps to test? Is your automation code works perfectly fine on all the devices? Consider you're running it in Galaxy S6 Edge and S7 Edge. Does it always passes? Consider both runs on Marshmallow. Is it always green? Yeah, consider your application is pretty good. Is it always green? No. At least for me, it never be green. At least it works perfectly fine in iOS 1, but not in iOS 2, 10.2, sorry. So these are all the challenges that we face. One is testing infrastructure. When you have a pretty good set of devices available in market, and you need to ensure your application is perfectly fine across all the devices. So you need to have a very good amount, very good investment on the devices that we support, and we need to maintain it properly. And then device coverage, and next is execution time. So in agile market, time to market should be very less. There are awks that goes live every 10.3 seconds. So how about the test execution time there? Should be lesser than 10.3 seconds. And then test coverage, it works perfectly fine in Galaxy S6 Edge, which runs on Marshmallow, but not on Galaxy S7 Edge, runs on Marshmallow. Same vendor, Samsung. Unreliable tests. So these are all the challenges that we face in mobile application testing. So when I said test execution time, in order to reduce the execution time, we go for automation. That's where we pick Appium. So Appium is one of the cross-platform tool. Write one code, single piece of code that runs everywhere. Write a single piece of code that tests your Android apps, Windows apps. Yep, Mac is bolder. I'm waiting for Dan's talk. Mac is going to get released, Mac driver. He's going to talk about Mac driver. It's a single piece of code that runs on iOS, Android, Windows, and now it's going to be Mac as well. Yep. And it supports native, hybrid, web, mobile web, and the desktop apps. So few stats about Appium. Just before I took this screenshot, it was 4,900 stars. And then I got a Slack note from Dan saying, we have reached 5,000 stars. Okay, I'll take another screenshot then. Yep. We have 5,000 plus stars just for the server. And if you take the entire org, it could be 6,000 plus or 7,000 plus, including all the drivers that we have, XUIT driver, iOS driver, and all the drivers if you take it. And few stats from NPM. We have 2,000 downloads per day and 9,000 downloads approximately per week. Yep, 734 open issues. Out of 734 open issues, at least a minimum of 100 issues on the installation. Yep. So we'll see how is Appium installation a pain, how we are going to mitigate that installation pain. Yep, as he said sometime back, to automate an application, we need all the dependencies. In order to automate your native app or hybrid apps, we need this many dependencies. So for Android, we need to have our SDK and SDK environment variables to be configured. Android environment variables, Java 8 or Java 7, Java Home, and Node.js. Since Appium is written on Node.js, it's a Node.js server, so Node is required. NPM, we need to download it from NPM registry. So these are all the dependencies for Android. And again, real devices or iOS. In terms of iOS, it's pretty much tightly coupled with OS X. So we have Xcode, Carthage, and if you want to run your apps, run your automated test in your real device, we need to have, you need to be an Apple developer, so that you need to have the certificate installed, and it should be debug signed. So, and again OS X. And simulators are real device. So these are all the dependencies that we have to be concerned about. Just to install these dependencies, at least for Android, it takes quite a bit of time. Those who have, how many of you have attended workshop yesterday? Appium workshop? Okay. At least they would have faced installation issues and took some time to install and configure everything. Yeah. So what if I download everything in few seconds? I just need to have a OS, at least for Android. So I just need to have a machine which has Linux or whatever flavors of Linux, or Windows or Mac, OS X, and just download a single Docker image which has everything that I need. So containers are the application plus all its dependencies, libraries, and binaries, configuration files. Yep. It's a single portable environment, as like create your Docker image, save it in a Docker registry, run it in any of the, run it anywhere, as like we have a JRE, develop somewhere, run anywhere, the same way. And application platform and its dependencies, all differences in OS distributions, everything that needs for an application to power up, or an automation test to run on that application. Yeah. So now we have a Docker container, which has pretty much everything for a Android setup to be available. So just download all the just download a single Docker image which has all its dependencies available inside. So life is so smooth. You don't need to install or take up or fight with environment variables when you have Java 8, Java 7, Android SDK, when there is an upgrade in Android SDK. So, and you can even containerize the emulator as well in case if you want to run on emulator. Again, it's a OS is a base image. Base image is Ubuntu, which is on the right. So, and I have Appium server, which is up and running in my container. And what I would like to see what is happening exactly inside my container. So I have a real VNC server, which is up and running. So anytime you can connect and see what's exactly happening inside my container. Is it really running, or what magic is going, or what magic is happening inside? So I have a container, Docker image. If I power up, all the application that I have kept inside will be up and running. So Appium server will be listening on the same port 4723 that we use. So this is how a Docker file will look like. Is it visible? So it has set of instructions. Is it visible now? Yeah. It has set of instructions for Appium Android setup to be up and running. From Ubuntu 16.0.4, 16.04 is a base image. Along with that, have installed OpenJDK 8, which is for Java 8, and have set all the environment variables. If you scroll down, you can see Android SDK, Node.js, Appium Beta, which is 1.6.4. Yep, it's exposing the port, default port. Yep. We have everything up and running for Android. So what about iOS? If I containerize my automated test to run on Android, what about iOS? As I said, so what about iOS? iOS needs Xcode, simulator, Carthage, OS X, and to run on a real device, we need to be an Apple developer. So everything is possible only if you have a Mac or OS X. So Docker doesn't, or Apple doesn't support to power up a base image which has OS X. So it is not possible. So how I can Dockerize? So when it comes to market, Android devices are quite high. Like as I said, everything works on Galaxy S6 Edge. And what about S7 Edge? We support both. Our application supports both. Our application should work on both. So containerize it and run it so that you will have a pretty less time to manage it. So have a very good Linux box which has a good hardware, and you don't need to buy a Mac for it or Windows for it to maintain Android. So you have consider you have 20 devices to be supported. Pull the Docker image and setup. Setup is done. Just connect all the 20 devices to the Linux, and with one container, or you can spin up as many containers as you want to. So have a real device demo. Yep, this is my Docker file. When you build it, it creates a Docker image for you. So when you run the image, it creates a container. So from single Docker image that's saved in Docker registry, we can turn up as many containers as we can. So it's a real device. I just want to explore my application. We have a, we'll show the application. So it takes, depends on the hardware we have, it takes on the bandwidth we have, it takes the time to build that Docker image. For example, you need a API 24 and one might need API 25. So it depends on the bandwidth, and it sizes 1.8 GB for a Docker image for Appium server to be up and running. So this is my sample application built on React Native. So in that we have a slider, so wherein I have an automated test which is going to run or horizontally scroll the slider, and we have other gestures as well. Drag and drop. So it's basically a React Native application. How many of you work on React Native here? Yep. How easy it is to automate React Native application? It's pretty easy. So I have a Docker machine up and running. So Docker machine creates a virtual host for me. In order to share my USB of my Mac, I need to have a Docker machine to be up and running, wherein it contains my Docker images. So I have a couple of Docker images. One is Appium 1, Java Maven, Appium. Appium contains all the dependencies that Appium needs, like whatever I have showed in the Docker file, and it is of 1.83 GB. And Ubuntu, which is the base image which I have built on, and Java 8 is for Java Maven, which comes up with Java 8 and Maven. Yep. Now there is no containers which is up and running. If I run Appium, so it turns up a container for me. Yep. This is the sample code which we all write, and this is the test that does the horizontal swiping in my React Native application. So there is no change in the test. I'm going to find the element, do a touch action, tap on the coordinates, scroll horizontal. Yeah. There is no change in the test when you try to Dockerize it. There will be a change in desired capabilities, just the IP address where my where my Appium server is up and running. It is actually running inside my container, so there is a change in IP address there. Yep. Port number, port number can be same or it can be different. If it depends on how many real devices being hooked up. So IP address is the IP address where my Docker machine is up and running, and rest of desired capabilities are almost same. And now I'm going to power up the container from the Docker image. So Docker image is Appium. Docker command to power up the container or power up the Docker image is docker run -d, and -capsp is for porting. So it assigns a port which is 4723 to some of the ports so that we can access it. And I am saying it should be having a privileged access, and then I am mounting the volume so that a real device connected to my Mac PC should have access to the container so that I can run in my real devices. So you can see that Docker image is up and running. So privileged access with volume mounted. So when we do docker ps-a, it gives me the process what exactly it is running. So you can find it there. Yep. So 4723 is mapped to 32769, and there is another IP. Another port 5900 over there, which is mapped to 32768, where my VNC server is running, so that I can port in and see what's actually happening inside my Docker container. Yeah. In order to see the logs, we can always get into the logs and get Appium server logs, what actually my Appium server is doing. And if in case of issues, we can file it in our GitHub so that we can actually act on it. Yep. Let's see what is the IP address, my IP address of the Docker machine. So Docker information IP address is where the Docker container is actually running, and Appium server is running on that container. So it's the IP I have given, and 32769 is the IP port number which is exposed, which is mapped to 4723. Yeah. Now we can see a process is up for certain minutes. Yep. Again, Docker doesn't have access to the React Native app, which is APK. So we need to copy the React Native app which is developed inside the Docker container. So we are copying it. So using Docker CP and path where exactly your React Native app is there to the path inside the container. Yep. Let's see what is actually happening inside the container. Docker logs and the name of the container is Appium. So it's just waiting for the commands to step in. So Appium server is up in the port number 4723 mapped to 32769. So it is waiting for the commands. So when you execute, we can switch inside the container and see whether my device is getting detected or not. Yep. Docker execute -it and Appium. So it will switch inside my container and see what is whether my real device is connected or not. ADB devices will list my real device. Yeah. And in case if you want to see whether APK is copied or not, we can check it out. So now we quickly switch to execute the test. Yep. So what are all the issues that you guys face when you automate a React Native app? Gestures. So most probably identification, locator strategies, it doesn't expose properly. So you can see that slider, horizontal slider worked now, and my test got passed. So it is the same way, there is no change in your test, it's just the IP address where your Appium server is running. Instead of localhost, you will give the IP address of the Docker container, and the port can be same, 4723. If you map it to 4723, it is same. And if it is Dockerized, how can I run it for iOS? It is the same way how you run it for iOS. Instead of the Docker container IP, and your desired capability should be iOS instead of Android, and IPA instead of APK. Rest are all same. Yeah. So we can see Docker container is still up and running. I'm removing it. And next, we have seen so many commands to be executed for a single application to be up and running and to be tested. So Docker has another concept called Docker Compose. So where you can, it's like a YML where you can specify which image to be used, and whatever actions that we have given, privileged, -, privileged is privileged true. Container name is name of the container which I am going to run, and volumes that I have mounted, USB to USB, and then I have copied the APK inside the container. Yep. Vodka APK to the path where I wanted to copy it, and then port, instead of assigning it to 32769 or whatever, it is assigned to 4723. And now my tests are also containerized. So I have a container which has a Java 8 and Maven. I just want to containerize my test as well. So one container which has Appium up and running, another container which has Java Maven, wherein I run my test. So yeah, both are mounted and both talks to each other. So now 4723 is mapped to 4723. So you don't need to specify for 32769 there. Just go back, specify 4723. Yep. And we need just one command, Docker compose up. Everything is perfect. Instead of running the image using Docker run, then copying it manually, just run one command, Docker compose up. So now your Appium server is containerized, your tests are Dockerized. You can use Docker compose file whenever needed. So it's just a single command, Docker compose up. So when you run it, it creates two containers up and running, one with Appium server, another one with Java 8 and Maven, and which has the test as well. So it just downloads Survey plugin to execute Maven, whatever command that we have given. I think it is Maven clean test, which I have given. So we can see that it downloads. Yeah. So now you can see Appium server. So on the left, you can see the name of the container, wherein it connected to one device. You can see the logs, and you can see the real device that powers up the application. So installation is no more a pain now. Just download the image and just run it. Yep, everything perfect. Now build is successful. So instead of doing a lot of commands, use Docker Compose, have 2 containers, which has my M2 already moved to Maven repository, already moved to the moved inside the container. So you don't need to download again. So it's so simple to Dockerize now. Yeah, we have seen the demo and few references. We have our Docker Appium repository under Srinivasan Sekar, my GitHub ID, wherein you can see all the instructions being out there. And Awesome Appium is one way where you can find everything about Appium, just A to Z about Appium. And some of the references, as like we have Docker Selenium, we have Appium Docker Android that has the image for emulator, that has the image for real devices. It's pretty cool. So that's all. Have any queries? Have any questions? Yep.
So is it always safe to assume that the IP of the host is the IP that you pass in, right?
Yep. In case if you want to use Mac, if you have a good infrastructure that has plenty of Macs to connect to 20 devices, you need to use Docker machines so that you will have a USB mounted. In case if you are going to use Linux, not required, just you don't need to have a Docker container. So your Appium server actually runs on your local host. As like how you run it in your normal PC, you can run it as it.
I was asking more from like a CI/CD perspective, where you have one setup where you can run your tests. So in your desired capabilities, if multiple tests are running, you need to pass in the specific
IP address of the Docker machine. Yeah, that's where I came across. So it will be always 127.0.0.1 or local host. Consider you have thousands of containers up and running. IP address of Docker container is different, but Appium server is same. You can always use 127 or the local host.
Okay.
Yeah, you can.
All right, that's all the time we have for the session. So let's go ahead and thank.
Yep. Thank you.